All right. Well, Sue Lerch, thanks for joining us today. We were just talking about how you go by Sue or Susan, how my mom's name is Susan, how my business partner Brad's mother's name was Sue.
Mhm.
There's powerful Susans everywhere. So thank you for joining us today on the podcast. We'd love to just jump in and we were just talking about how, it's November 2020 and the world is challenging, right? There's just a
Yeah.
lot going on with the coronavirus. Obviously, the election just happened, and for you personally, you just lost your mother, and I
Right.
lost my father back in March. You see, you add all these things together, and it's really hard to find some peace, to find some stability nowadays. And so, as a leader, I'm curious, how do you do it? How do you take care of yourself so that you can help take care of your team?
It's been really challenging, I think, in a lot of ways. One of the things that I've recently discussed with our operations and finance director was just how we need to look at some of our policies and things like that in relation to loss. If we were to look at it officially, if you lose a parent, they're 3 days off for that. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. And we, I have another colleague who went through the loss of her mom right around the same period I was dealing with my mom's illness and passing. And I just said, you do what you need to do to take care of yourself and your family. And that's really how we operate. And I have a tendency, though, to feel the need to take care of others more than myself sometimes. And so I really realized in the thick of all the things going on that I had to take care of myself. I was just exhausted and emotionally drained. Um, and I have wonderful people that I work with. So why did I feel this compulsion to have to be involved in our, weekly Zoom meetings? Or we had a board meeting actually in the midst of all this with our agency's board of directors. And I finally, after years and years of work and service and nearing retirement age, I realized I don't have to be there. I've got good people, and I've tried to create an environment where there is a lack of bureaucracy and hierarchy. And so I don't have to be there. They can handle it. And it worked. And I realized I had to take time for myself, or I wasn't going to be able to be effective and model what I'm saying, especially in the midst of the corona virus, that families first, and that you need to take care of yourself. How could I not do that for my own situation? And
Yeah.
so, of course, I had wonderful support from the team. And, we realized that, especially during times where we have so many unknowns in the world, and then you lose a parent or a loved one, you have to take care of yourself, or you're not going to be effective in the work environment. And I know right now I have staff that have young children, and others that are similar to me in this kind of sandwich generation where I don't have kids at home anymore. I have grown kids with um, some grandchildren, and then I had my mom, and my husband's father is still living and in his 90s. And, you know, we can only do so much. And we have to trust those that we work with and figure out how can we best maintain what we're trying to accomplish and our purpose and our mission, but also realize we can't necessarily do it all. We have to have others in place who can support us as we go through tough times.
Yeah, and to literally entrust them, to put trust into the team and
Right.
realize that life goes on, without us as CEOs, without us as leaders. Not that we can disappear, but we've got to be able to trust our teams and to set them free to do what they need to do.
Exactly. And something really good that came out of it too was that folks had the opportunity to step into leadership roles. Or, we had a board of directors meeting, and that was taking place right in the midst of everything that I was dealing with my mom in hospice. And I was like, gosh, I just can't be there. And other folks stepped in and they took care of it, including our, of course, our board itself, and our staff leadership and colleagues, and everything went fine. Now, I don't mean to say that I think I'm, unnecessary, but it was great to have the grace of everyone allowing me the time that I had to have in order to get through, at least initially, some aspects of what I was dealing with from a care perspective for my mom, and people coming in, her sibling from out of town, and um, trying to allow some semblance of normalcy and for her, and yet dealing with her being extraordinarily ill. And so I was really grateful that we had created such a team focus really at our organization, that people are there for one another when things start to go awry. And I am really grateful that we created an environment like that, a culture where people step up, and
Where the
yeah,
team is willing to do just that, to be a team. You've created a culture where folks come together to support each other. And I would imagine not just in extremely trying times like the passing of your mother, but in general, that the team is there for each other. So what do you think is the secret there? If you were to give advice to other leaders out there, maybe new CEOs, how do you create that sort of culture?
I think it can be really challenging. It has to start with, though, a level of trust and accountability, and really um, assuring that people are confident in what it is that they have the responsibility to do, but also sharing that responsibility and the authority with the team. I have experimented throughout my professional life with different kinds of leadership models. And for me, I believe that I am not a person that is really tied to a hierarchical model. Um, Yet I do know that in reality, when you are the boss, then some things do fall to you, and people, that's sort of how we typically operate. And so there are, from a comfort level, a lot of people like to see it that way. I have tried to make it so that I'm open to a variety of perspectives, and I want people to um, feel like they can own things that are theirs. We agree on what kinds of programs and activities we're going to provide, but I can step away from that and allow them to, the individual, to build with their own vision. And I guess what I like most is when I'm asked to contribute something because they are comfortable asking,
Mm.
and that we consequently have a very genuine outcome for folks for whatever it is we're trying to accomplish. Both the recipient of a program or an activity, but the individual who's leading it as well. And I love to put in my 2 cents, I guess, when it's asked for. Um,
Yeah, but you've empowered your team so much that they see it as their responsibility. They have ownership over it, and so they're seeing you as a coach that can help them versus the boss that they have to go get permission on every little thing from. I love that you said
Yes.
trust and accountability. I haven't heard those two put together very often, frankly. Most leaders don't love accountability. It's got this negative baggage to it, which I think is unfair and unhelpful. So I'm curious, how do you think about accountability?
I think that it is something that we can, as a team, hold one another accountable. And I guess this came from many years ago. I had the opportunity to work with a guy named Patrick Lencioni, who's written several management books. And one of my favorites is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team or The Five Temptations of a CEO. And in those books, they're very short. But they have this whole area where it talks about accountability and trust. And so, if you say you're going to do something and it's part of a process to create the end result that we're all working toward, we have a responsibility to be accountable to one another. And that's how I think of it. It's like, if you said you were going to have something done by a certain date, then have it done or have an explanation, and that doesn't mean we can't be flexible, because the other thing I really believe in is flexibility in the workplace. And I think that's why we've had so much what I see as success during this challenging time of the virus, because we had to be nimble. At first, I think everybody just kind of went, like a screeching halt. We thought it was going to be a short time, but then if you go back to realizing this is going to be around for a while, we had to be flexible. We had to be accountable. We had sponsors for various activities that we were doing, and so we had to come up with a way to be effective in providing that in order to maintain those resources and make our organization continue to be viable. And I think that that's where the accountability piece comes in. And I feel fortunate. I think sometimes we worry so much about an individual's resume. We don't always think about the basic of the very first thing you need is a wonderful, decent human being, and someone who is willing to step up and be accountable, and also as somebody who's trustworthy and wants success, not for just themselves, but for the organization and their colleagues. And I feel like I've been very fortunate to be able to build those kinds of teams in the organizations where I've had the privilege to serve in a leadership capacity. It makes all the difference in the world. Honesty, trust with one another, and being flexible.
Yeah, and throwing a little bit of hard work, and you got a powerful team, right? It's I think it was the chairman, one of the chairmans of Marriott, and they asked him, wow, your people are so nice. How do you train them to be nice? And he said, I don't train them. They came that way. We hire nice, hardworking, decent people. And when you hire those folks, they continue to be nice, hardworking, decent people. So how do you think about hiring for yourself over the years?
It's been really interesting. I think I'm probably a unique hirer in some ways. There's a woman that I hired years ago before about 10 years or so, it's longer at this point. I was at the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and a woman came in to be our communications director. And I got a gazillion calls from people I knew about how remarkable she was. And this was going to be a big change for her. And she was coming from the newspaper industry. And she came in, and we just had an amazing conversation. And and I was like, gosh, I have had all these people that I've worked with call me and just rave about you before I even met you. Yeah. And I kind of went with my, she had the credentials, but also with my gut, which they tell you not to do. But whenever I've gone more for credentials and less with my gut, it's been problematic. Now, that doesn't mean, obviously, if you're going to go to the doctor, you have to have a doctor. But in this particular case, at the end of the interview, it was just an amazing conversation. And I said, of course you're going to be our new communications person. And gave her a hug. And she said, I have never been in an interview where I got a hug. And since then, she's gone on and she now is the CEO of Gilda's Club in the Detroit area. And she's expanded that program. And I hear from her every now and then about the difference that made and in coming in and working at the organization where I was and I left shortly after that, but that gave her this new place to blossom and grow. And now she's doing amazing things with Gilda's. And I love that. I mean, I think for me, there is a lot of finding people that are a yin to my yang or whatever. I think the woman that now is our associate director at HFM had been suggested by a colleague, and we were in need of someone who could do some very specific things within the granting world with the pharmaceutical industry. And she came in and we met, and I had talked with a lot of other people, and there just wasn't that, that kind of connection. Her skill set is kind of similar to mine, but she's much more able to focus on some of the very nitty gritty details, which is, I can do it. I'm just not, doesn't make me happy. And for her, it's an amazing, unique ability. So I've often tried to find people that I think have a unique ability that will work well with my own abilities and with our team. And she has just grown this for us over the last 4 or 5 years like crazy. And it's because, again, she was someone who had a desire to grow in a position. And we have certainly thrown that at her. And we just have such respect for each other. And I guess that's the other thing that I respect the people I work with.
Yeah.
I really want to make sure that they understand how much I respect them. And it's, you don't want a bunch of homogenous people either. You want people that have differing perspectives and ideas and allow them the opportunity to share those perspectives and to really be able to consider it. That doesn't mean I always go along with something that's completely different than what I was thinking, but I'm open to it. And I do remember another former colleague from another organization said, watch out for Susan. If you have an idea and you go to her and you suggest it, she's likely to say, yeah, let's try it. And then you're going to have to do it. So that's I hope that ends up being a pro most of the time for folks. But also, I think you allow your team to fail or an individual to fail at something. And as long as we all recognize that it's an opportunity for professional growth, that's okay. Yeah. And I think that level of comfort and safety that folks have, I hope, is another aspect of the kind of leadership I try to assure for folks that I work with.
Yeah. Well, I love, there's so much in what you said that we could talk about, from trusting your gut and actually the brain science behind that there's literally connections between the stomach and the brain. And so when we say that, it's not just a feeling, there's actually some science behind it. And as leaders, especially for someone who's got the experience you do, this leadership is not a 100% science game. It's there's a lot of art to it, and finding that passion, giving people that respect, and trusting them to do their job, giving them responsibility, allowing them to fail, all beautiful things that are easy to say, they're easy to talk about intellectually, but it sounds like you've really mastered the art of actually doing that. You brought up, Make-A-Wish, which is such an amazing organization. Brad has done the bike ride from northern Michigan to southern Michigan every year for, I think, the last 20 years. It's 100 miles a day for 3 straight days. I still in awe of that, and he's 20 years older than me. And so I'd love to hear about your experience there and your time there, and what really animated your heart about that work.
Oh, I loved it. And there are times now when I'm thinking, why did I leave that place? I loved it. But I felt when I did make the decision to leave, I felt that it would be fine, that it was going to be okay. And that the group I was actually going to work with were people with, it was a startup in relation to autism, and that was not that was going to be tough. And that those people with children, especially who were impacted, needed, the kind of joyful leadership that I believe I typically provide to organizations. But Make-A-Wish was amazing, and I loved the growth we were able to create there, and being there for families and children at this really challenging time when they have, a child with a life-threatening or terminal illness, and being able to bring joy into their world was such an honor. And there were particular stories, of course, of being able to do things that really made a significant difference for everyone engaged with the child. And it was really so heartfelt from those that were engaged. And also, Disney wishes for a lot of kids, that was what they wanted. And those changed people's lives because they got to go be part of Give Kids the World, and all these other remarkable volunteers and individual organizations that were part of it. But what I loved the most were often the very unique wishes, and the folks who got to experience something that was completely out of the norm, and that was certainly Disney for a lot of our families. But we had a little boy who was adopted or not adopted, actually, he lost his family in Vietnam. One of his parents, I believe the mother, happened to be American. And the parents both died, and a baby sister. And so here's this little boy. He had some family back in the US, but they weren't prepared to care for him. He had all kinds of very serious health issues. So there happened to be a family in Michigan that became his foster grandparents, they call them, because they were an older couple. And what he wanted for his wish was to go back to Vietnam and say goodbye to what he called his Ya, was his grandma there. And we were able to make that happen. But they didn't have a name or anything. It's an amazing, amazing story.
Wow.
And this little guy, a lot of the chapters around the country at that time weren't doing international wishes, and certainly wouldn't have done something like this. But I think that's where we kind of stood out, in that we were very willing to see how we could make this happen. And the woman who was the wish manager now is out in California, and she works for a hospital system in their PR. Her name's Meredith Allard. And this wish changed her life. It certainly changed my life, because ultimately, by putting ads on television in Vietnam, we were ultimately able to find his grandmother.
Wow.
And we saw video of him. He was 6 years old and running up to his grandma. It gives me chills now when I think about it.
Gives me chills. And this is the first time I've heard the story.
It's just, and there are many stories like that, especially when you go the extra mile. And I think that's what we did, and that's what I wanted to have happen. We had another child who wanted to meet, oh gosh, now I can't remember. This is terrible. But oh gosh, you two. Who's the lead guy? Uh,
Bono.
yeah, Bono. He wanted to meet Bono, and for those kinds of things, um, we had a celebrity coordinator at the national organization, and they had said, Bono just it's not available to do that kind of stuff. So he changed his wish, and he happened to be a wish kid. My husband and I were a volunteer team in addition to my work at the organization, and he happened to be a kid who was my and Dan's wish kid. We were the volunteers, and so he changed his wish to contributing to Bono's One Foundation, and I was like, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but I bet you anything, instead of you wanting to meet Bono, Bono's going to want to meet you. And that is exactly what ultimately happened. And it was just so amazing. And this kid was just an incredible human being. And he said, you know what? My wish in the first place should have been to contribute my wish to the One Foundation. And so, getting to meet these incredible children, both of these boys unfortunately passed away shortly after their wish experiences. But we have other kids that were part of Make-A-Wish that are now the staunchest supporters. And I think that, we were able to grow the Wish a Mile that Brad participates in exponentially. And it was really through support from Brad. He offered us consulting support. And we talked about how growing it was essentially a gift from the universe. How could we turn that down? And it just grew and was just an amazing thing. Another thing, which of course was with Elmo. I could go on and on. But
yes. Well, give us a sense for what that growth looked like. Sort of you raised how much and now how much is being raised?
We went from just about a $1.5–2 million organization. When I left, it was about $6.5 million, I believe, and going from 100 plus wishes to over 400 wishes. And for me, part of what I think allowed me to go was that I knew it was going to be fine, but I also saw that what was happening is there was going to be, we were our own separate 501c3, but part of a national organization. And sometimes, we're all in it together and it's wonderful, but sometimes I see happening with larger entities, instead of rising up, you go to sort of the center. And I thought that's what was happening. And that was what was happening, and that wanted to create a more common theme as far as websites and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, well, for me, I like to help invent and create and grow things. And I felt like it was, an opportunity for me to go on and do that. And now what I'm excited about with the Hemophilia Foundation is it has such a personal meaning to me. In addition to being there professionally at a time when the organization really needed it. I have a granddaughter who is a carrier. And so my daughter fell in love and met the guy that she's now been married to for 10 years at the Hemophilia Foundation's summer camp program when she was an arts and crafts director. And I had worked at this agency back in the 80s when HIV and AIDS hit the organization. And I feel like, I left the end of 94 because I had kind of hit a wall because so many people that I knew and loved had died from HIV and AIDS through tainted blood products. And it was just so tough. And Make-A-Wish, while very challenging as well, because you were still coming in and you were inserting joy and then backing back out in most situations, although I still have friends and folks that I grew to love deeply whose families were impacted by a wish. But I thought the Hemophilia Foundation needs me and my perspective. And I was able to bring along some former colleagues from my Make-A-Wish days. And I think that also contributed to the teamwork. Not everybody that works at HFM worked at Make-A-Wish, but we have a few folks that that are there because they wanted to be in an environment like that, like we had.
Yeah. Huh. Well, Sue, I'm going to ask you, for your book recommendation in a second, so you can think about that. But it's clear that, you have such a heart for the mission and for what you do and for who you serve, throughout all of your organizations. And we only touched on a couple of them today. And that's such a attractive force. I think that, frankly, a lot of leaders are missing that. They're sort of doing it for maybe power or for the position or for the challenge, and not that those aren't part of the decision, but it's so clear to me that you have such a heart for the work, and that's why you are attracted to the CEO position. So I just want to thank you for all your years of service and all the years of service yet to come out of you.
Yeah. Thank you. The thing that I really, really, truly love too is watching an individual grow and bloom and blossom. And that's where that whole idea of getting folks into a spot in the organization, everybody's got to do stuff they don't want to do. That's life. But where they really can shine and grow and their own unique abilities are able to be demonstrated. And I think that seems to be, I've had several folks who come and gone over the years that I've stayed in touch with who say that seems to be one of my unique abilities. And so I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share that perspective with you and with your anyone who happens to watch us.
Yes, or listen to us. Yes,
or listen.
So what book would you recommend? What stands out to you as sort of the book that you want the world to know about?
Well, I have to say, of course, I mentioned Patrick Lencioni and the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and I think that's a great book. Another one that I really have appreciated is Adam Grant and his book, Give and Take. Yeah. And I had a wonderful opportunity to get to work with Adam a little bit when he was at University of Michigan, and he liked my managerial style, and I think he's done some really remarkable things in his career. And then the other one that I'm just getting to know, and I'm blank, it's Alan Dignan,
Aaron Dignan.
Yes, the one that you guys recommended. I'm like, whoa, this is good stuff. I have not read the book yet. His new book.
Yeah, Brave New Work. Yeah, Aaron Dignan, Brave New Work, phenomenal book. Very, very get your head thinking in 1,000 different ways about all these things that we are sort of stuck doing, and why are we stuck doing them?
We need to break out of that.
Yes.
We can create a lot more flexibility and trust in our people. So I like that a lot. I watched a little bit. I've watched a couple things, videos, thanks to you guys, you and Brad. But and now I've got to get the book. So excited.
It is a great book. The video is good too, but the book is much more. It's like everything else. People say the book's better than the movie, right? But highly recommend it. Yeah, great recommendation. Well, thank you, Sue, again. We appreciate the time, and we look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Well, and I'm looking at this think sign behind me, and one of the things I think leaders have to do is they need to be able to think, and they also have to do. And sometimes we have folks on our teams who are doers, and sometimes we have folks that are thinkers, but I think we need to think and do, and we'll be successful.
I love it. Great way to end.